Welcome, everybody. I'm Ben Random, and I'm going to be hosting this next chat. I'm excited about this one. I'm excited. We've got two heavyweights. That's what it said in the email. Capital letters. Ben, you've got two heavyweights. I was like, oh, here we go. We're going to balance this like a Gemini.
Who sent that email?
I can't tell you. It's confidential. You did.
It's my PR.
You sent it.
My assistant sent it.
I love that. But I suppose we might as well start by if you could give yourselves both a brief introduction about who you are, what you do, who you represent, and then we'll roll from there. Would you like to start?
Hey, so I'm Sarah. I work at Grade Management, artist manager there. I've been working there for 8 years. We manage a bunch of high-profile underground artists. So it goes from Seth Troxler, Maceo Plex, Groove Armada, and mainly tech house, electronic DJs. And recently started to work with live artists as well. So singers, performers, etc.
That's cool.
My name's Kazim, and I am I do a lot of things, but like a creative director, I guess you would describe it as, but also sometimes manage artists. And previously worked at a record label called Warp Records, where I was head of marketing, and now I consult for musicians and record labels and brands like Adidas and Nike and stuff like that as well.
Now, before we get into this, you sort of grazed over it, but could you sum up some of the other stuff that you do? 'Cause this is one cool brother. I tell you, man, yeah, man, you represent.
Yeah. Don't know what you're talking about in specifically.
Yeah, man. Like I see you. You're a heavy hitter with like articles, and you know your views. You're very strong on your views, but it's I feel like you're a voice of an age at the moment, man. I do.
Thanks, man. I guess I also make artwork and curate experiences for people, and I guess that's what you're describing. So it often gets a bit of attention in the news and press and magazines and newspapers and that. I also manage Nightmares on Wax as well, which is why I'm here today. So it's nice.
So let's start here then. So how do you juggle the two? How do you juggle your own life with being a manager?
Sometimes I'm not a very good manager, actually, that's the truth. And I'm not brilliant at juggling those things. And yeah, I mean, it's all sort of the same thing, isn't it, really? Like, you've just got to be brilliant, try and be brilliant at the things that you do and try as hard as you can. And sometimes you're really good at it and sometimes you're less good at it.
But then in that respect, did you get approached to be the manager at Nightmares on Wax? Or because I imagine if you've come from a friendship background, there's more of an understanding if you might be a bit lethargic in it as opposed to what's expected.
The Nightmares on Wax relationship, I used to work at the record label Warp Records. It was my last job. And I met him. I used to study in Leeds, so I met George when I was at the label and he didn't have a manager, but I was managing a few other artists at the time who were like, they weren't big, but they were like really, really like hot. Everyone was like they were on all like on magazine covers and stuff, but they were like making zero money. But I knew how to make artists popular and credible and cool. And I worked at the record label, and it was just an interesting time, you know. Like you have an artist who's been around for a really long time, has got a very healthy business, but actually cultural currency was something that he needed. So it was a very convenient relationship. The things that I was good at, he was missing, and things that I was bad at, he didn't need. So, and I was doing a project for Red Bull at the time, and in South Africa, and I invited him to come on tour with me for like 3 days, and we just spent 5 days together. We'd actually never met before that, and by the end of those 5 days, I was his manager. It was like that.
I love that. Yeah. So that's the almost like organic, let's do it ourselves DIY way of becoming a manager. Yeah. How would you say that your entity in your relations with being a manager differs?
It depends on the artist, but it's a lot of the time is very organic. It was always the same. So it's either meeting an artist at a festival and spending a couple of days, and then after staying in touch, or the artists talking within themselves, and then we're like, actually, so and so said like loved working with you, or she loved working with you. So should we meet and go for a coffee? And it is always like that. And usually, well, with all the people I work right now, it's taken 3 meets, and from the meeting number 1, you just know you're on the same wavelength.
Would you ever turn down artists, no matter how big, if you don't think there's that connection?
Yeah, yes, of course. I think, well, for a good manager is someone that knows, that understands what the artist wants and helps it achieve his goals. So the artist and the manager have to see it the same way. There is definitely managers and artists that have fallen out badly because they didn't see it the same way. So I think you know straight away if you like the same music, if you evolve in the same networks. And I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, because sometimes that is what the artist needs. But most of the time, it's just really organic. Yeah.
What qualities would you say a manager brings to an artist?
I think a manager amplifies what an artist already has. I definitely think a manager doesn't make magic, like doesn't create. Sometimes artists come with not knowing at all what they want and think that the manager is going to do everything. But I think, yeah, it's just amplifying something that the artist already knows and wants, and also linking them with the right people and making things happen. So to be for an artist to be current and to evolve within the scene, there should always be like a project, something happening. So it's just talking with the artist and deciding what the artist wants and creating things. Whereas a piece of music, whether it's a remix, whether it's a partnership with a brand or another artist, or a tour in a certain thing, or charity event, like always something happening. So the artist can actually make it happen. So the manager. So the artist can just focus on the more creative side, I guess.
So you're obviously looking to relieve a lot of the external factors, so the artists can focus on what their main passion and obviously what they're here to achieve do, and maximise their creative output in that. How many artists, not on your label, but personally, would you say that you manage?
Personally,
Yeah.
3.
And would you say that, do you have a maximum number in mind of what you would take on board?
3.
Have you ever gone over 3, and is that like...
Yes, but it's usually you're part of a team, so you're not by yourself on the 3. So there's a few different people, but to personally manage, I was just talking with Kazim earlier. I was just like, my dream is to just have one artist, but he was telling me that's not that great. Like, that's pros and cons.
That's amazing, because obviously that's where I was going to come to now. You managing 3, I imagine completely different personalities.
Completely different music,
You know, it all have their own needs. All, I suppose, want you to be at their beck and call all the time. But I suppose you've got the outlet of, look, I'm managing 3 different people, and you've got that onus. When it's just one person, the sole focus, does that amplify the pressure on that? Or is it maybe because it's one person, it's a bit more chilled? Not chilled in a sense of the pragmatic nature of the business, but more chilled because it's just a one-on-one. You know, it's less demanding outside people trying to get your attention.
Yeah, it is a bit more, like what you're describing is a bit easier when it's just one relationship. But I think managing an artist isn't my sole focus. You know what I mean? So I've still got like, my focus is still split in 1,000 different ways. So I think if you wanted to like do one thing and it was managing one artist, you'd literally have to manage like Avicii. I mean, sorry, he's dead now, but you know, like a Tiesto type figure. You need to have to manage someone gigantic for it to be economically worthwhile to sustain your like organization and the team around it. So they're not like management. You know, like it's a lucrative business, but also it's like, it's quite easy for it to not be very lucrative. So it's quite important for a lot of people to consider that, you know, like it's not just dead easy to make money out of it. So that's why companies like Grade have a lot of artists. You said there were 16 earlier, right? 16 artists.
16 managers as also, so.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, some of them, four of those artists are probably making 80% of the
Bankroll the
revenue.
rest of the company, yeah. And as you said, like some of the artists that I work with today are everywhere on the all lineups and all the front pages of magazines, etc. But they're not actually making money. Yeah. So there's a difference in artists.
Spinning plates, it's definite juggle.
I think the economics of the music business are like it's like a really stark reality if you like ever want to work in it. And I think it's been a really interesting experience. Obviously, like going through it in different ways, but it's so different from what you perceive it to be. And therefore, I mean, I don't personally consider myself as an artist manager. I think what Gray do is like so professional and so like I've known.
I think that's. I was going to come on to that, so I'll let you continue. But yeah, where's the definition with the line?
The thing is, the music business. It's a pretty old. It's like 70 years old. It's not really that old, so it's not a very sophisticated business in a lot of ways, and there isn't that much terminology, that much language to describe all the different things that you could do with all the different types of people, and so therefore, you know, like if you work with the artist, you basically get called a manager if you're like responsible for a few things. But now it's a little bit different where there's this term of like creative director has been sneaking in, and often artists will now, really big artists would have like a manager and a creative director and they would like do a few different things. So ultimately it just comes down to there not being a very sophisticated model. It's not very varied. You know what I mean?
Still very DIY everywhere in the scene. Even when you think about big labels, I'm not talking about majors, but when you think about big labels like Warp or Boiler Room or like big entities, and you all think it's going to be like very corporate, but it's just as DIY as like the smallest parties around.
I've found that. I mean, you know, speaking to the audience now, like I'm sure you've got this perception of certain brands out there where you think they're going to be behind this 18-story building with the massive glass windows and chandeliers. And as you say, when you sort of get behind the scenes, it is very grassroots, very DIY. But I think that's what a lot of the authenticity in some of these labels is, and the passion that drives it. And it's interesting. I wonder. I'd like to come to you for this. Where do you feel that a company can lose its identity and become too corporate, because it needs those sort of corporate things in place, yet it still needs substance, so that it's not just a generic Eric?
I mean, we all start with an ethos, I guess, and a story, and I guess it's just not losing it. Because
do you remind yourself of that quite regular? Would you say?
I mean, we as Grain Management stay in the dark. Literally just launched the website now because people are actually like, you don't have a website, but we are not a brand. As managers, we are, because every artist is different. We don't want to be in the forefront. We're just in the background, and every artist is their own thing. So we try and not shout about the company as such. So we have no branding, and even going like creating the website now. The designer was like, so should we make you a logo? And it's just like, yeah, just Grade in capital. And it's
understated, but that's how you all are.
Yeah, and I guess this gives more freedom to the artist to be whoever they want to be, and not feel like they shouldn't join or shouldn't work with certain people because they don't want to be associated with another artist and another thing. So yeah, so everyone keeps really their grassroots and their
identity.
Yeah, and I think it's the same with a lot of other companies and labels and everything. Like the rosters on labels are just, each artist is different and has a different image. And
yeah, because you want to obviously show. We'll come to questions in a moment, if that's all right, just towards the end, if that's cool. Cheers. Yeah, I suppose that's quite a key identity to an agency, is to have a roster that fills so many different identities and personalities on there, because it shows the varied, wide range of the people that you represent.
I mean, it's a choice. I'm sure other companies prefer to focus on one thing and specialize in really one niche market, I guess. So.
I saw your mic, William. Mic go. Are you going to say something like that? No, that's all good. I wonder then, right? How do you stop people poaching your clients, and also how do you poach others?
As I said, every relation that we have with artists is also friendship. So apart from having contracts that actually not all the artists want to sign, but some artists have been here since 8 years ago, since the start of the company. So it's really like based on trust.
Do you think people would have that trust and open honesty to let you know where it's not going right if they seek elsewhere? Like, I'm sure in your experience it has happened.
It happens, and it has happened from. I feel like in America it's not quite the same game, and it has happened for some artists coming after tours of 2-3 weeks in America and coming back and be like, okay, well, this agency has contacted me, or blah, they literally forward us the email, and we're like, well, that guy just got in touch. Or so far it's been very very see-through, and when something is wrong, it's definitely wrong, and it clashes. It's a relationship. We're in contact with the artist 24/7. So when the artist is if it's our fault slacking somehow, or if the artist has had a really bad time on a personal level, whatever, it can clash on the management relation for sure. But we work through it together.
Is there some form of management code etiquette where you respect it, or is it dog eat dog where you're like, if you could get someone, it's like you're in? If there's a way in and there's a vibe, there's a level. I feel like I'm a bit like Jerry Springer or something like that. I'm after the dirt.
I have to say, I might be still naive and young in the market, or just I have been lucky to hang out with the right people, but it hasn't quite happened around us yet. So I'm not sure. I don't know if you have a more crispy story.
I think that just to build on what Sarah was saying, I think that essentially in this side of the business, the personal relationship is like your only real contract, and the actual paperwork they mean nothing if the relationship breaks. So you could be in a contract with an artist, but if they don't want to work with you, if the relationship's broken in any way, actually the relationship's over. Do you know what I mean? So it's what Sarah was saying there about trust. The emotional element of the relationship is like 99.9% of the value of the relationship. It don't matter how many contracts you've got in place, how like long you've worked with them, or whatever those sort of legal things in place are. They sort of mean nothing if the relationship breaks. And yeah, I mean, whether that makes it easier for people to come and get them or not is case by case. But
that's also, sorry, I'm just going to follow up. If some of you here are artists and think, how can I find a manager? How can I get a manager? That's also a way to say you can't just find a random manager. It has to be someone that you build a relationship with and then become a manager. It doesn't even have to be a manager in the first place, as long as someone that takes care of you and has your best interest at heart.
Would you say that your experience of being a manager or creative director, if there was other scope for other artists, do you think you've got the timescale to involve that in your workload?
Yeah, I've had. There's been times where I've like had a larger roster. Previously, like 3 years ago, I had a management company. There was like 4 people working there, and there was like 5 artists, and it was a different setup. And I was more inclined to wanting to build like a specific management company. At the time, it became uninteresting for me, but I'm not against managing more people if the right people come along. But what I've learned about myself is that like I'm actually not really an artist manager. I can do a little bit of artist management. What I bring to a relationship is actually quite unique to a very specific person at a very specific point in their career and with a very specific creative outlook. So the scope for me to manage people is actually like really fucking narrow. Do you know what I mean? There's like hardly any people on the planet that need me, and there's hardly any people on the planet that I need. And it's just about sometimes every now and again your paths cross and you work on it. But I don't really have an ambition to be an artist manager. I got lucky with a few projects, and then suddenly there was like a company with 5 artists on there and 4 staff, and it was like it was out of my control, and it became out of control, and I just decided to shut it down because I wasn't interested. And if I work on music projects again, and I'm about to start a new one actually, it's like, and I consider myself retired. I don't even work in the music business anymore. But this project's come along, and it's like it's at the right stage in his career. It's creatively, it's perfect. Like I'm perfect for it. It's perfect for me. The economics of it makes sense because he needs somebody and I need somebody. I can offer the thing that he needs. And so there's like a little bit of alchemy, you know what I mean? And I think when the alchemy's right, and I think that's what Sarah's saying, it's not about any old manager. It's like, you just got to try and find that alchemy. That's what I believe anyway. But I also don't run a management company that has like 16 agents and stuff. Like they can probably afford to make decisions that I can't make because I'm not I'm set up differently. You know what I mean? To me, like that like spiritual bit is like the most important bit. If it ain't there, I can't work on it.
Would you say then, and this is to both of you, if you're up and coming and you've got a friend, somebody who's like been with you day one, could they be a manager? And is, you know, because it is all about that connection. Like, do you feel like they could be a manager, but then how, if that's the set, would they go and make the connections? It feels like it's almost like you need a manager who's got the connections, but you need that relationship. Like, I'd like to know the middle gap, if you could, if there's any insight into that middle gap.
My opinion is that if you are like a brand new artist and youngish, the manager is probably somebody really close to you, because like all you need in the beginning is someone who's gonna like work so hard for you and grind so much and just try and batter down as many doors as possible. And ultimately that's probably going to be someone who's like emotionally attached to the project, or you, probably a friend, and someone who's got like a desire to be in that side of the business and has time. And it's probably someone who's you're quite close to. My two most successful projects, not in terms of scale, but in terms of like cultural currency. One was at a time where I'd like never managed anyone before ever, and had zero pedigree in the business. And the second was at a time where I wouldn't have even considered myself the manager. Do you know what I mean? So, and we'd actually known each other for 10 years. And I just like knew how to do the thing that he wanted to do. So I always think that the person you're probably looking for is much closer to you than you think.
The company that's been running now for close to 8 years has started with two friends. So the directors of the company that were not managers. So they were putting on parties, student parties in Bristol, and hanging out in Ibiza loads, and they were booking their friends that would come at the time and sleep on their couches, and turns out their friends were like Jamie Jones and Seth Troxler. So it's just like it's growing all together and working alongside and creating something together, and then somehow just ended up with like a big-ish company. So there's always a starting point, and as we were talking about earlier, there's no rules because it's such a young. I don't know when the first manager was in history, but I'm sure it's like 50 years max. I don't know. So there's no rules to the business. So it's just knocking on doors and going to the right events and just making things happen, having the time and the energy for it and the love.
Yeah, that's a really important point. The music business is basically like 70 years old. Digital music is basically 10 years old. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not even, there's no history really. So actually,
before that, the music industry was all major labels and A&R, and a manager was like the manager of the Rolling Stones or whatever. So it's what was the manager then and what it did then was not what we do now at all.
Yeah, I also think that the word manager is also like, people have so many expectations with it. Like yesterday, somebody offered me a project of like, anyway, I won't go into it. Somebody that's very, very, very well established, like incredibly well established, and they don't have a manager currently, but they're adverse to it, right? They don't want one. So we were talking about the idea of like, wouldn't it, if that person doesn't want a manager because they don't want to be managed, psychologically speaking, there's loads of different ways you could structure that person's company to ensure that they have the support they need to like give it strategic and creative direction. They don't need to be called a manager. They can be called 5 different titles.
It is true that word does carry so much connotation to it.
And expectation, and it's loaded, and it's historic, and people feel like they're working for someone. And this particular case is a really interesting one because they're like ginormous and currently they don't ever want to feel like they want to work for someone else, right? So it's like a psychological thing, but it's also how do you then make that person's business go from A to Z? Do you need a manager? Actually, you don't. You need people. You can structure your business in any way you want. You just need people around you to help execute your vision. Maybe it's a friend and you call them manager, but maybe it's like not. Maybe it's your lawyer. Some people don't even have managers, just have lawyers. They have brilliant lawyers. You know what I mean?
A lawyer and an assistant, and you can do everything yourself. But it depends on the artist. It depends on what you want to do, what you have time to do, and some people are like loads of artists in the industry don't have managers and they're doing really well, but they're just on it. Yeah.
I like this back and forth. I like it. Synergy. That sort of leads me on to the next point. I'll start with yourself because I think this is maybe where your expertise may lie. But in representing, shall we use it rather than managing, representing an artist, how do you go about collaborating with the artist to know what their profile will be is associated with which brands work well for them? How do you get them in the right conversations with the right people to then help escalate their brand to be seen?
I don't. There's not a. Sorry, that's a dead good question. That doesn't have a good answer, I'm afraid. There isn't really a science to it. You know what I mean? You've just got to hustle the whole time, all the time.
Before you say, because I feel like you've nailed that, and I'm sure a lot of people have come here, and myself, you know, I'm a stand-up artist, looking to grow, and it is weird, like this term manager, you feel like it's going to be this Aladdin with the three wishes almost, like, and I'm sure a lot of people have come here expecting like that sort of golden answer, and I think you've just nailed it there. I feel like there isn't really an exclamation point to it, is there?
No, but it is like there isn't. But sometimes there's like a bit of alchemy that happens, and if you have the right person who understands your creative vision, and they have an ability to execute it because they understand the industry, they have some strategy in their mind, and they're like able to do things literally like help put on a show or like do a shoot or whatever it turns out like you want to do, then like there's a certain amount of alchemy that happens and it helps you get to your like magic potion.
How would people then say, like we're saying that from the grassroots, a manager is going to be somebody that's quite close to you, invested in you. How then, and I know it's alchemy and I know it's universe, but how I'm a massive believer of that, but I'm here for you people, I know you want this. How do they seek people like you? Like, where like, you can't just Google, hello.
Yeah, but
like, you know what I mean? Like, where can people go for it, man?
Yeah, but you can see who around you who's like making moves. You know what I mean? You can see who's making moves around you, who you can touch and access, right? They might not be making the world's biggest moves, but at least it might be something that's inspiring locally. That person probably has, like before, the project I did before Nightmares was something that we started from scratch, and it was somebody that I knew like 10 years ago, and they were in a band, and the band was awful, and they were always sending me music, and I never listened to any of it, and then like 10 years later, he sent me some demos, and I really liked it, and I was like, you know what, I just know how this can go down. But we'd known each other for 10 years, and I'd never, ever, ever responded to anything that he sent me because I didn't like it. But then at some point, the timing was right for both of us. You know what I mean? And he was interested in what I was doing, and I was interested in what he was doing at that time. So, again, it's just like timing, alchemy, stay open, feel.
Would you, if you do start a management company, you got to call it alchemy, by the way, I do like that. But like, would you say then, again, it's for people who are in everybody's circle, and you admire, like you say, a hustle or a work style about them, and it's almost like they may be good in this model of work, it's a different environment, but they've got the skill set that can be transferable to this industry.
Can I just say, though, I actually think the way that I approach stuff is
completely...
Yeah, it's like well unique to me, but I think the way that like a company like Grade would potentially approach it might be different. So I would love to hear what Sarah thinks.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. What would you say in a sense of a more structured business entity? How would you say
slightly more professional? Right.
No, but I actually think it's quite the same. I actually think it's quite the same, and it's just like it's a network of somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody, and it's all about creating little things and persevere, and these things will grow. So just like having your own crew and going out to the right events and hanging out with the right people and getting to meet the right people, and then just persevere, and then things just happen. And obviously, as I said, the manager and the artist have to see things the same way. So they'll be listening to the same music and be hanging out with the same people. So they will be at the same party at the same time, at the same area of a festival at the same time, or sing. So it's just like things happen because they're meant to happen. That doesn't sound professional, but that is literally how it.
No, but that's
it
life, and I do agree with that. But I just like to follow on that. Would you say then, is there a potential portfolio that you would expect, or if you went for this coffee and you got on with everybody, but then, for example, they didn't maybe have a demo or their online world set up, like, is there some sort of protocol that you'd like to see as a professional sort of intent as an artist?
It's just like seeing the artist doing it themselves, and because if somebody just makes music and keeps the music on his laptop and doesn't share it and thing, it's just there's not much things going there. So if it's someone that actually has started his own label and just puts music on Bandcamp and invites their friends and have a party in like a 100-cap venue, but then invites the DJ that they really actually want to play on the same lineups as. So you see that there is something happening, something bubbling at the back, even though nobody knows about them, but they're really talented and they really want it and they're creating something around them, even if it's just around them. But then the manager will see that. Not just the manager, the labels and everyone, the other artists, they
There's
see
a subtle
it.
buzz that you feel. That must be exciting then, to discover
totally.
and unearth them. Because a lot of the artists that you named at the start are obviously well established, but is there still that sort of buzz that is ingrained in discovering unearthing the talent?
Yeah. So the two new artists that signed recently are just starting, and it's just completely different way of working with them, and I absolutely love it because there's so much energy and creativity and so much that can happen. So many like we can link them with different people, put them in the studio with different people. It's great.
I actually think that's like the best advice, because you know what, like having worked at record labels and done management and all of those, like loads of different things in the music business, like if you have any ambition to be signed to a record label or a booking agent or an artist management or any of those things, like the very, very, very best thing you can ever do is to go so far as to look like you don't need those people. If a record label sees that you can put out music and people will buy it and consume it and you can do shows and it looks like you don't even need a manager, that's like the single most attractive thing to a manager or a record label or imagine a booking agent. If you've got 10 shows already, then a booking agent's more interested. If you've got streaming figures, they don't have to be astronomical, you don't have to be doing like, Wembley Arena or whatever, but if you've got like multiple shows in multiple cities in maybe a few countries, even if those shows are £100 and you're like, you're just breaking even, it's still the most attractive thing. All record labels and managements, all they want to feel is like dispensable, and suddenly you're attractive.
Nowadays, everything that a label or a manager or an agency can do, you can definitely do yourself with the internet and with the programs and the backends that are available. So really, you don't actually need a manager.
Not to be like well corny or anything, but like the reason why is not just because it's like not just because of the economics, because they're like, oh right, suddenly this could be successful, we could make money out of it. Obviously, that's like a gigantic part of it, but it's also to do with the fact that I think this is like well cheesy, but Andy Warhol said like making art is fun, but making the art business is even funner. And it's like the art shouldn't stop with the thing that you make. The execution is just as much a part of the artistic process, like how it rolls out, like who consumes it, what it looks like. All of that is all part of the process. So it's simply to like make music and have it on your laptop and maybe send it to people, there's just like not enough of an artist for people to be interested.
Not a full rounded.
It's not enough, you know what I mean? And I think it's like to underestimate all the other bits is like where most people fall short. Most people are just like, I've got this record and I think it's great. And maybe it is good, but like, what's the point on a manager or a record label working with that artist if that's all there is? Because they're going to have to do all the other work, which in theory is most of it. You know what I mean?
I feel as well, if you're already going through the avenues of setting yourself up, like you say, and let to a point where you don't need that representation, even though that's what you're after, it almost holds you in a better stead as well, because as an artist, you've got your voice. And that will hold you in better stead with the negotiations going into the...
And you understand everything, so you're not just blind and get people to make you do things that you don't actually understand. So starting the work yourself makes you more knowledgeable in the whole back end. So after, when someone else does it for you, you know actually what's going on.
An example, I had a project of an artist that I was still working at Warp at the time, and the artist sent me this. I was working with this artist. We'd finished a record, and we sent it to like Warp, XL, Ninja, a few Island, a few majors. Everybody said no. Everyone was like, "Nah, sorry, it's not ready yet. We're not going to touch it." And then we just spent 12 months rinsing it. Put 2 mixtapes out, an EP, did like 50 shows, and then every single label made an offer. Every single one of them.
You say no to everything.
I said yes to one thing.
Can you say what it was?
It was Warp in the end. I said yes to, but I was working for them. So.
No, which artist?
Oh, right, no.
I love that. Ladies and gents, would you please put your hands together? Sarah, Kazim, thank you all. I'm Ben Random.
Thank you.
Stick around for the next chat. Peace.